doing well. Without, not, I guess, not my voice isn't, but great time for my voice to stop working right at the start of an audio medium. But maybe that's the altitude, because on this episode of Where in the World it is Mark, I am in Denver. So never been in Denver before. Going to Red Rocks today. Excited about it.
All right, you got to hydrate. Got to hydrate during the altitude change, Mark. Pro tip.
True. True.
So, all right. Well, Mark, all the way from Denver, joining us. Can I call? Do we call you Denver, Mark? We should just start calling you whatever city you're in. Denver, Mark, Jacksonville, Mark. But
Carmark San. I was bad. I had a bad joke coming. Carmark San Diego. Mark. I don't know what it is. I don't know.
We'll workshop that. So we are kicking off our draft coverage today. And those of you that have followed us for a long time, we have done these draft ranking episodes for several years now. Actually, the inception of this podcast came out of the draft, the first draft. What draft was that, Mark? 2019 draft that we covered together?
I think it was 20.
No, or it would have been 2020 draft going into the 2020 season, I think. No. You're right. 2020 going into the 2021 season.
2021 season, and then we started in the off season after that. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So Mark and I first met doing draft coverage for the Painted Lines, and started this podcast together 225 episodes ago. So we are going to be doing draft rankings for every position group. In the past, we've done those with Dibes and Ryan. We've sort of split that into two shows for right now. Dibes, Ryan, and David are doing their draft rankings on Birds of the Roundtable. Mark and I are going to do ours here. We'll probably have a couple crossover shows and, of course, our live draft stream when we get there. But scheduling-wise, it worked out better to do it this way. And so we're going to be ranking quarterbacks today. And so don't be confused in the podcast feed when you see already a quarterback ranking episode. That was theirs. This is ours, and we are going to spread out a little bit. So we're doing quarterbacks this week when they did them last week. Next week we're going to do tight ends, but then we're going to flip to the defense. So we're not covering like the same positions right after each other. So you'll hear us rank our edge rushers, for example, in February, and you might not hear them rank theirs until early April. And so you can sort of get some of the movement. You get introduced to different players. So if the draft isn't your thing, that's totally fine. If you want to skip towards the end of the show, we'll give some final thoughts on the Eagles' needs at each position and where we would be comfortable with them drafting guys and things like that. So if you're not interested in all of the profiles, you can skip to the end and we'll talk just a little bit about the Eagles' positions too. But we've pretty well got this plotted out to take us through the draft at the end of April. And then, as we always do, we'll do our draft grades, and then we'll get into our off-season content, the expansion drafts, QB rankings, all of that sort of stuff. But as I said this morning, we are going to be ranking our top 5 quarterbacks in the NFL draft. And so let's jump into it. Traditionally, we've gone 5-1 in this show. We're going to flip that format, at least for today, and see how we like it. We're going to go from number 1 to number 5. Just naturally, the way it breaks down going 5-1 is we would always end up with whoever had a player the lowest talking about them first, which kind of makes the draft slant a little more negative. And honestly, with the quarterbacks, we kind of need to flip it to make the slant a little more positive because it's not a great quarterback class to begin with. But let's dive in and talk about our number ones. We both have the same guy at number 1. It's Fernando Mendoza from Indiana via Cal. We got to start adding that into all of these now because of all of the transfer portal and things. But I'll hop in with Mendoza, and Mark, you can jump in as we get there. But everybody that follows college football knows something of Fernando Mendoza's story. He blows up this season at Indiana. But he was a 3-star recruit who started his career at the University of California, and he was an untouted recruit. If you fast forward 4 years, he wins the Heisman Trophy. He leads Indiana to a national championship. So obviously a great story. He started 9 games as a redshirt freshman at Cal in 2023, and he played there for 2 years before he transfers to Indiana for his junior season, which became his final season this year. He is 6'5", which is about 87th percentile height, 225 pounds, which is about 61st percentile weight. And I say about because we don't have combine measurables yet, and so once we get those in 2 weeks, we'll have these locked in a little more. But roughly, that's where he's at. He'll be 22.7 years old on draft night. I'm going with those decimals this year just to try to differentiate between the old 22-year-olds and the young 22-year-olds, because there can be a bit of a difference. As for his stats, he throws for 3,500 yards at Indiana this year, 41 touchdowns to 6 interceptions. He also rushed for 7 touchdowns. And so he broke the school record, single-season Indiana record for touchdowns. Per PFF, he had a 5.1% big-time throw rate this year, 2.5% turnover-worthy play rate, and a 15.8% pressure-to-sack rate. And so I'll go through some of his strengths and weaknesses. Obviously, Mark was shaking his head when I went through his physicals. He's got good size, and a lot of quarterbacks in this class don't. So good size with pocket passer build, and that projects cleanly to the next level. He's not a guy who relies on athleticism to win or relies necessarily on gimmicks. He's pretty comfortable operating from within structure on timing-based passing concepts. And again, when you get these less athletic guys in college, a lot of times they're more attuned to that, whereas your athletic guys can struggle to play on schedule. I think he throws well with anticipation to the middle of the field, especially that intermediate middle of the field that teams like to attack and that the Eagles offense avoids like a black hole at times. He works through his progressions pretty quickly. He's not overly reliant on just first read throws. He has good ball placement. He's got experience working under center and using play action, which are always pluses when you project to the league. And he's stands tough in the pocket when he's under pressure. He's also great in the red zone, and you can call that a small sample size, but since 2024, he's thrown 39 touchdowns in the red zone and 0 interceptions. As for his weaknesses, he does have limited playmaking ability outside of structure. And I know the run in the national championship game sticks out, and he can use his legs, but he's not a guy that you're going to design runs for at the NFL level. I would say he has functional mobility, but it's not going to be a focal point of the game. He's a bit of an inconsistent deep ball thrower. I think he shows the ability to manipulate defenders with his eyes, but he doesn't do that consistently. And so that's something that he's going to have to work on. When he's under pressure, I mentioned he'll stand tall in the pocket, but his mechanics do deteriorate a bit, and so his accuracy takes a hit. And he just simply doesn't have elite arm talent. And I'm not there's not really a quarterback in this class that does. So those second reaction play opportunities are not going to be there as much. He can be late pulling the trigger, throwing into tight coverage, which is okay if you've got a Josh Allen arm, but he doesn't. So you either have to be a little quicker to pull the trigger, or you've got to have a stronger arm. And I don't think he really excels in either of those areas. And he's prone to drifting in muddy pockets instead of climbing up out of them. So that's kind of my profile for Mendoza. I've got a first-round grade on him. He's going to be overdrafted. I don't think this is a guy that should go 1 overall, but that's the nature of the quarterback position. I have not worked through scouting reports for every position, and so I can't tell you where he's going to rank on my big board until we get really close to the end of the process. It wouldn't surprise me. Where do you have him, Mark? Do you have an overall yet for him yet, or?
I'm still working through stacking the overall, but he's going to be somewhere probably in the, I'd say probably in the 15 to 20 range for me overall. There was a point of this season that I thought I might be the crazy person who doesn't give him a first round grade, maybe halfway through the season or maybe even a little bit before the playoffs started. But I do think you have to index what he did in the playoff against the best competition he saw all year, and he did take it up another level there. And even just looking at the playoff here, you look at what he did, especially again. I guess the stats aren't as crazy as watching it felt. He was so in control, and I mean the efficiency is insane against. In the quarterfinal against Alabama, he's 14 for 16 for 192 yards, and he's 17 for 20 for 177 yards and 5 touchdowns. I guess he wasn't incredible in the national championship, but he stepped up at the end when they needed them to deliver the final drive and go run it in and win the game. And I'm definitely I've given up some of my anti-Mendoza position that I think I was ready to take halfway through the year and at certain points of the year. to me, he really reminds you of Goff as a prospect. Like it really is. And I saw this this cut up clip. I watched like a 5 or 6 minute video on Twitter of Goff in college. Someone kind of comparing him to Mendoza, and he was moving a lot more in college. People forget that about Goff. When you go back and watch that college tape, it really does look like the way that Mendoza runs. And not that Mendoza's running is going to be a huge part of what he does, but he's not a statue back there. So he is going to be able to move around. He is going to be able to buy time, maybe, get your first down on third down every once in a couple times a game, maybe, or probably not a couple times a game, but he's obviously going to be the Raider. He's going to be the first pick to the Raiders. He's going to be working in, on a roster that does not have a lot of talent on it, other than Ashton Jeanty and Brock Bowers. Now you don't have any wide receivers. Your defense is going to be probably the worst in the league. Your O-line is very old, and I think a bunch expired this year in terms of their contract. But you do have Clint Kubiak coming in to save the day. So I'm really interested to see kind of what we obviously just saw what Clint did with Sam Darnold. Obviously, different situation with Sam being in the league for so long and Mendoza being a rookie. But the way Mendoza talks, and this is a point in his favor, he really does very much seem like a football computer a little bit. And it seems like he's obsessed with football. And I think he's going to be someone who's able to pick up a system pretty well. And it seems like Clint did a good job last year adjusting his system completely to what Sam Darnold did well, and adjusting JSN and the route tree that he gave JSN. And he's going to have to find the receiver to help Mendoza with that. But, I'm skeptical of Mendoza a little bit, but, great head coach that he's going to, and at least he has a couple pieces there on offense to work with.
Yeah. Yeah. So is this the first official Mark comp? Is Jared Goff the comp for Fernando Mendoza?
Yeah. I think it's definitely, he probably has a little less arm talent than Goff, maybe, and a little more mobility than Goff, even counting in the fact that Goff ran more in college. But yeah, Goff would be my comp. I think he probably ends up slightly worse than Goff down the line if we're just like comparing, over their whatever first 10 years of their careers or whatever you can make the comparison of. I would take Goff's career over what I think Mendoza's next 10 years will look like.
Yeah.
But I think it's a fair comp. I think it's the only one that I have. Maybe one more coming up actually, but I only have 2 comps here so far.
All right. And I by the way, I put down best suited for West Coast or play action heavy offenses. So we want the Shanahan McVay style offense probably for a guy that I saw somebody online call him, compare him to Matt Ryan if Matt Ryan was mobile. And it's like, I could get on board with that. But
yeah, I've heard I feel like there's it's like Matt Ryan, Jared Goff. There's one more that he gets one other white guy he gets compared to a lot, and it's always like, but a little more mobile.
Yeah,
I forget who. I can't remember the third one. There's one other name, and it's kind of like they're all on the same. You just have to decide where on the scale you think those guys are. I guess Ryan's better than Goff, obviously. It's a name I would say in between Ryan and Goff that I hear a lot for him, but I'm blanking on it. I'll try to look it up and see if I can remember it as we go along.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's keep rolling then. We both have Mendoza number 1. We both have Ty Simpson from Alabama number 2. Ty Simpson was a 5-star recruit coming out of high school. He's the son of a longtime head coach, UT Martin head coach Jason Simpson. So he's been around football his entire life, obviously. He's been at Alabama since 2022. But going into the 2025 season, he had attempted less than 30 passes. And so, why has this guy, who is such a highly touted recruit, just been unable to get on the field? Well, he was sitting behind guys, Bryce Young and Jalen Milroe. I don't know, you might have heard of him. So he's been around good quarterbacks at the collegiate level, regardless what you think of Jalen Milroe, regardless what you think about Bryce Young as an NFL player, he's been around football his whole life. He's been in good quarterback rooms at Alabama. He is 6'2", which is 33rd percentile height, 210 pounds, which is 11th percentile weight. Will be 23.4 years old on draft night. In 2025, he had a 6.5% big-time throw rate with a 2.9% turnover-worthy play rate and a 19.4% pressure-to-sack rate. He completed 64.5% of his passes for 3,500 yards, 28 touchdowns, and 5 interceptions. When you look at Simpson, I always want to say Simpson. When you look at Simpson, I'm going to call him Samson all draft cycle. The first thing that sticks out to me is he's got a quick, compact release. That's the biggest thing I think that stands out to me. He's comfortable operating from within structure and using progression-based reads, and I think that's where you get his football acumen. He seems like a really intelligent player, and just the way he surveys the field. He's poised in the pocket and willing to stand in the pocket under pressure. I think he shows anticipation on intermediate throws over the middle of the field, capable of working through full field progressions like I mentioned, and he's got good short to intermediate accuracy. I would say he has functional mobility as well. He can extend plays, he can execute boot action concepts, and he has a lot of experience in pro-style systems. Well, I guess not a lot of experience. He's only a one-year starter, but he's experienced in a pro-style system, utilizing play action, running timing concepts off of it, all of those sort of things. And then one of the big things is, at Alabama, he had the freedom to set and adjust protections at the line of scrimmage. And so, like I said, really sharp player, pre-snap, probably the best guy in the class. However, he doesn't have high-end arm talent, right? He's not a guy that can rifle the ball all over the field. His deep ball is inconsistent. At the end of the day, he is a one-year starter. He's attempted only 523 passes at the collegiate level. He's undersized, like I mentioned, and he's dealt with nagging injuries in his lone year as a starter. He's had fractured ribs, he hurt his lower back, he hurt his elbow, and he struggles to create out of structure. And so if you're going to be a small guy, at least be able to create out of structure, and I don't think he's great at that either. And then, kind of like I talked about with Mendoza, but his mechanics really deteriorate when he's under pressure, and it translates into poor accuracy at times. Through his first 9 games of the season, he completed 70% of his passes with a 21-1 touchdown to interception ratio, and he was a Heisman candidate. But then he met the Brent Venables defense at Oklahoma, and everything changed. Over the final 6 games of the season, he posted only a 57% completion percentage and averaged only 158 yards per game through the air. And so he's a guy that, like, if we had a 2 or 3 year sample size and he just had a rough stretch down the stretch in his last year where there were some injuries, you might be willing to discount that. But I think it's worth mentioning, the life cycle of quarterbacks in the NFL, particularly backups, we see all the time where guys come in and play a few good games and then tapes out on them and teams adjust and they struggle with those counter adjustments. I think it's really fair to have those concerns about Simpson. So I gave him a 2nd round grade. I think he's going to fit best in a West Coast or Shanahan style offense that's going to emphasize the things he's good at: rhythm, timing, play action, rather than vertical isolation concepts or off-script creation. He's going to struggle in those worlds. But I put a 2nd round grade on him. Where are you at with Simpson?
I'm out on Simpson.
All right.
I have him 2nd. I don't think I'm going to have him in my top 100, to be honest with you. I'm trying to find the tweet out there that was trying to, I think it tracked all of the 1 year or less college quarterbacks, or forget if it was 1 year or less or a certain amount of pass attempts that a quarterback had to reach on this chart. But it was since like the 90s, and it is not an impressive list. The guys who only come out with 1 year, you're really hanging your hat. I tried to do my own Google search once I couldn't find the tweet here. You're kind of hanging your hat on Kyler Murray or Cam Newton, in my opinion, who both have like pretty outlier athleticism. And I wouldn't necessarily say Kyler's been like a rousing success. Like, yeah. I think that's definitely up in the air considering he's about to probably be on another team. And Cam, I think, is a one-of-one freak who probably can't be compared to normal quarterbacks. So I just think that the 1 year and the fact that there is stuff in that 1 year that you can be really concerned about. He does not handle pressure well whatsoever. And I think I would have been, it's kind of the opposite of Mendoza. I think I would have been higher on Simpson before his final 3 games in college, where he went SEC championship, first round of the playoffs, second round of the playoffs. And this is kind of indicative of the entire Simpson season a little bit to me. The final 3 games, if you take those 3 games and you add all the numbers up, the stats don't look that insanely bad. He had 500 yards over the 3 games, not good, but not the worst. 3 touchdowns. He still only had 1 pick. He had a 58% completion percentage, which isn't good, but not the worst. But in those 3 games, his team scored 3 points in one of the games, and his team scored 7 points in another one of the games. And for much of those 2 games, they felt helpless on offense. I felt like a lot of garbage time that came in at the end of some of those games, and I can't shake the comp that I heard of him. And this is not my comp, and but there is a lot of JJ to him. His average depth of target is like really, really low. He's good in the middle of the field. He wasn't asked to do a ton. He had really good players around him. Once I heard the JJ comp, I was a little more scared than I was even before. But I think if you're high on Ty Simpson, you probably are saying, could he be Brock Purdy? I guess if I'm trying to think of someone who's a little undersized, maybe not an elite arm. But the difference with Brock Purdy is Brock Purdy played a ton of college football. I'm trying to see exactly how many years. Yeah, he played almost 4 full years, 3 full years and 10 games his freshman year. Brock Purdy played. So it's not, I don't love that comp to be honest. I have heard that out there, but I'm not a Ty Simpson guy. By the way, the name for Mendoza that I forgot was Kirk. People throw Kirk Cousins out there for Mendoza a lot as well.
All right. So let's go to our number 3s, and this is where our lists diverge a little bit. Mark, who do you have at number 3?
I got Garrett Nussmeier. Garrett Nussmeier is my number 3 guy. And this is a guy who I think a lot of people had tabbed as a sure thing first rounder coming into this season. He was great in 2024, especially in the first half of 2024, but still finished with 4,043 yards, 29 touchdowns. Now, he did throw a good amount of picks, 12 picks in those games. And he is a little undersized at 6'1", 205. But if you'll remember in the offseason, a lot of people were pointing out that his dad is the Saints offensive coordinator. So a lot of people thought maybe the Saints are tanking here and they can draft Nussmeier. I don't know if he's getting drafted on day 2, let alone in the first round now. And it's because his final season did not go well at LSU, just as most things didn't go well at LSU. Now, there is a lot of smoke that he was really hurt and playing through multiple injuries. There was rumors of a shoulder injury and a back injury and a leg injury, and LSU, and this is an annoying thing about Brian Kelly. Brian Kelly's very cagey about injury stuff with his players, so he wouldn't. They kept listing him as questionable, but wouldn't really give any information, and then eventually just sat him down. There's part of me that wants to give, and I think me ranking him over Carson Beck, me putting him 3 over Beck at 4, is basically just me, I guess, giving him grace that he was probably really hurt this year. So if I'm just evaluating off of that 2024 tape, he would probably be my number 2 guy, and he would probably be maybe in my a second round guy, maybe a third round guy for me. But I'm not willing to totally ignore how bad 2025 was, in part because the end of 2024 was a little shaky as well. he was great for the first half of the year, but if you look at the second half, he he really started throwing more picks. Really started. I think part of the intrigue was that he did take chances down the field. He did have 3 games of more than 350 yards over his first 8 games. But then over his last, 5 or 6 games, he was not the same guy. His completion percentage dipped. Everything kind of dipped a little bit. I guess his air yards were still up there, but yeah, he didn't look like the same guy at the end of 2024 as he did at the beginning. Or else I'd be even more willing to totally ignore 2025, but I can't ignore it.
Yeah. So for me, so you mentioned him putting the football in harm's way. It happens way too often. Over the last 2 seasons, he had a 3.1 and a 3.0% turnover-worthy play rate, which resulted in 17 interceptions. And that's especially magnified when he's pressured. When he is kept clean, his turnover-worthy play rate is at 2%. When he's pressured, it's up at 6%. So everything falls apart when he is pressured. He does have a quick, compact release, and he's an anticipation thrower, especially over the middle of the field, good at timing concepts. I feel like he works through his progressions quickly, but the biggest thing for him, for me, is that you're coming off of an undisclosed injury that caused you to miss the end of the season, and you're so small, 17th percentile height, 4th percentile weight. So I tagged him with a medical red flag because, all of the injury stuff makes his evaluation really tricky. How much of the 2025 fall off was playing injured? What is the actual injury? I think it's some sort of torso or abdominal injury, but
I think it was oblique what they announced, but I don't know what it actually is.
Yeah, so there's a lot of missing pieces to the Garrett Nussmeier puzzle. So he is my QB4 in this draft. I gave him a late third round grade, and again. And I feel like I've said this with every guy, but the scheme fit here is a West Coast or timing-based offense. You want to emphasize rhythm, progression read, structure. He's good at those things. He adjusts protections at the line of scrimmage pre-snap. He works through those progressions quickly post-snap. There's just not a lot of second reaction stuff. There's not great arm talent there. This is a good year to run a Shanahan system and need a backup quarterback. It's a good year for that.
Yeah, in 2023 and 2024, his ADOT removing screens was 12 yards, and in 2025 it was 10.7. And his efficiency also dropped off the table in terms of his downfield efficiency. So it's hard to, like you said, the injuries make it a tricky evaluation. What even is the injury? And then, secondarily, how much did that affect his arm strength? Because it seems like a lot.
Yeah. All right. So that is Mark's 3. It's my 4. My 3 and Mark's number 4 is Carson Beck, quarterback from Miami via Georgia. Carson Beck was a 4-star recruit. He was a backup for his first 3 years at Georgia before starting there for 2 seasons. He had an elbow injury in late 2024 that caused him to come back to college for a 6th year, where he transferred to Miami. And somewhere along the way became a player my son likes to watch. So for some reason, I don't know why, he latched on to Carson Beck and really likes him. So we rooted for Carson Beck sometimes on Saturdays this year. But he is 6'4", which is 73rd percentile height, 220 pounds, 44th percentile weight, 23.2 years old on draft night. In 2025, he had a 3.6% big-time throw rate, 2.3% turnover-worthy play rate, and a 16.7% pressure-to-sack rate. Completed 72.4% of his passes for 3,800 yards, 30 touchdowns, and 12 interceptions. Like a lot of these guys, I think Beck works really well from structure with good tempo and rhythm. He is very experienced in college. He's attempted almost 1,400 passes in his collegiate career. He's amassed 11,700 career passing yards, 88 touchdowns. And so when you talk about, we talked about Ty Simpson, 1-year starter. Carson Beck, you've got a lot of tape on him to draw from and look at growth over the years and things. So, and that experience is evident in his pre and post snap processing. I think he's really good there. He's got good ball placement on the short and intermediate throws, but again, like a lot of these guys, it felt like you're watching the same tape sometimes. Inconsistent deep ball placement. He's not the best athlete. He's not going to be very impactful as a runner in the NFL. And he struggles under pressure. I feel like him more than anybody. He's skittish about contact. When protection breaks down, his accuracy breaks down, and he puts the ball in harm's way. And so I think his drop in play in 2024 compared to 2023 is directly related. Like, you can draw a direct line to offensive line play. He struggled to mitigate that in 2024. Overall, I gave him a late third-round grade as well, and basically said the same thing. Like, the West Coast timing-based system, you want to emphasize rhythm, progression reads, rather than improv. And that's kind of the pathway to success for Carson Beck, a guy who's played a lot of football, and you can see that on the field, but maybe just not the most physically talented guy.
He makes some of the most bozo throws you will ever see from like a legitimately pretty good college quarterback. It is 24 picks in the last 2 years, but it's not about the amount of picks. It's about how bad 4 or 5 of those picks have been that are like, man, it's hard for me to erase those. And like you said, the 2024, it obviously is the down year, and I'm a little less willing to ignore that year because it's the one year he wasn't surrounded by pretty elite talent. In 2023, he has Bowers and Ladd McConkey around him with multiple NFL offensive linemen in front of him. And then this year at Miami as an elite running back in Mark Fletcher. And then at receiver, he's got a future, I don't know, top 5 pick in Malachi Toney. I mean, he's 5'11", so maybe not top 5 pick, but as a freshman at 18, having 109 catches for 1,211 yards and 10 touchdowns, I think he probably might be a top 5 to 10 pick one day. But I do think, and maybe you credit Carson Beck for, taking advantage of the elite talent around him and peppering the ball to those guys. But it wasn't just that. He also had CJ Daniels, who I also expect to be probably a day 2 pick this year. He had Keelan Marion, who's a stud. I think he had and not to mention, he had the best offensive line in the country in front of him, including maybe the best offensive lineman in this draft in Francis Mauigoa, who I don't know if I'm pronouncing that name correctly yet. But I do think he's a little bit of an elite talent merchant in terms of the guys around him in this year and then also in 2023.
All right, so that is Carson Beck. That brings us to our number 5s.
By the way, I'm happy Shane's a little higher on the 2 through 4 quarterbacks than I am, because it would have been bad if we both came on here and it's like, yeah, there's one guy worth talking about. Because I legitimately don't know. I don't think Ty Simpson's going to make my top 100, which means none of these guys make my top 100. And I don't know if I've ever had a year with one quarterback in my top 100.
Yeah. All right. It's the, what was the draft? The Kenny Pickett draft that everybody thought was so bad.
But at least that I had Pickett, Willis. Who else was in that draft?
Levis.
Yeah, I didn't like Levis, but I definitely had him top like 64, I think. I'm trying to see who else would have been in that. Okay, 2022. This is great audio.
I remember that I had Willis with first round grade, and that's looking better and better to have him the number 1 quarterback. Pickett, Ritter, Willis, Matt Corral, Bailey Zappi, Sam Howell, Skylar Thompson, Brock
I was
Purdy.
out on Ritter. I don't know if I had a top 100 grade on Ritter. I was so out on Ritter, but anyway, yeah, I think that draft class was better than this one somehow. Well, no, because Mendoza's way better than anybody in that class, but yeah, I had more faith, I guess, in a couple guys to maybe be something in that era. I do not want to go back and look at those rankings though at all, because man, I had a couple stinkers.
Yeah. All right, well, let's get into our number 5s. Mark, who do you have at number 5? I think we're different on 5.
This was a total shot in the dark. I really really struggled. And maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think that there's a guy outside of the top four. And I think the consensus top four is the top four we just gave. I will say neither of us are going to talk about this guy. So Cole Payton from North Dakota State seems to be gaining some buzz in some circles. I don't know if that means he'll actually go like top 100. I'll put an asterisk by Cole Payton. Besides that, I don't think anybody outside the top four goes until the 5th round. That's my official take. I think that's how bad this quarterback class is. But if I'm taking a shot in the dark on anybody, I'll take it on Taylor Green. He's 6'6". He's super athletic. He's an absolute freak show. But is he that good at playing quarterback? Debatable. Probably not. But he can run. He had said I think over the last 2 years he had 1,400 total yards, even with sacks counting as negative yardage. And he does have a lot of snaps over 3 years. He has about like 900 pass attempts, or probably about 800 to 900 pass attempts over the last 3 years. So he is a full-time 3-year starter. But I mean, this is just a total like developmental dice roll, like day 3. If you already have your quarterback and you have some time to wait around and develop a guy who might have some traits. Maybe you take him if you have a mobile quarterback.
All right. My number 5 is Drew Aller out of Penn State. 5-star recruit, 3-year starter for Penn State, although the 2025 season did end early with a broken ankle in early October. He only played 6 games. But he led Penn State to the college football playoff semifinal in 2024. 6'5", 235 pounds, which is 87th and 88th percentile, respectively. The youngest guy I've talked about so far at 21.1 years old on draft night. I'm going to use his 2024 numbers here since he only played 6 games in 2025, but he had a 4.1% big-time throw rate, a 1.1% turnover-worthy play rate, and a 13.3% pressure to sack rate. He did set Penn State records for completion percentage and interception percentage, while ranking 3rd in touchdown passes and 6th in passing yards over the course of his career. So you look at Aller, he's got prototypical size, right? Excellent velocity on the football. He's physically capable of making every throw when his mechanics are clean. I think he's an anticipation thrower. He mitigates pressure pretty well, sliding in the pocket. And he's attempted over 1,000 passes with good statistical production at a Power 5 school, which is worth mentioning. Also think he takes care of the football well. In 2024, when he threw 8 interceptions, I'll ask you this, Mark, just if you're guessing. He threw 8 interceptions in 2024. How many turnover-worthy plays do you think he had?
Probably like 15.
4.
Oh.
Yeah, so he takes care of the football well, despite what the interception totals show in 2024. He set a FBS record by not throwing an interception in his first 311 career passing attempts. So it's a guy that takes care of the football, but he's slow to progress through his reads when his first look's not there. He tends to lock onto that. I mentioned that he can make every throw when his mechanics are clean, but his footwork is really inconsistent. And so off-platform throws are going to impact his accuracy, especially when he feels pressure, and it just causes him to miss too many layups. His decision-making becomes less reliable when he's pressured, and although he's willing to run if there's yards there, he's not a dual-threat quarterback. And so I put a 4th-round grade on Aller. I said, he's going to fit in a play-action, rhythm-based passing scheme, but again, just not the best overall quarterback class. So any thoughts you want to chime in on him?
He's just been so bad against good competition in his time at Penn State, which is the story of the James Franklin era before Aller and still, during Aller. He's 0-6 against the AP top 6. I'm looking for, there was a tweet out there with the stats in those games, and it was not a good line that he had against the top competition, but he's also just a statue in the pocket. So, okay, so here's one. It's not the exact stat I was looking for, but against ranked opponents as a starter, he was 54.9% completion percentage, 166 yards per game, and he had 14 touchdowns to 5 picks. And he's had games in like big spots where he had like 110 yards and had like 60 yards at going into the fourth quarter and stuff. And I've just seen him turtle too many times in too many spots.
Yeah, comment here from Yako. As a Penn State fan, I don't think Aller should go before the third round, before the injury. On broadcast, it looked like he would wait for his receivers to be open before pulling the trigger. And yeah, I've got a day 3 grade on him. He's not a guy that I would want to be taking early. I do think there's some anticipation throws on the film, but yeah, I don't think he's a guy that you want to be taking. Definitely as a starter. Again, good year to need a backup in a play action based offense. So that is our top 5 quarterbacks. I, from 1 to 5, had Fernando Mendoza, Ty Simpson, Carson Beck, Garrett Nussmeier, and Drew Aller. Mark's was basically, we were the same at 1 and 2. Mark flipped Beck and Nussmeier. And who was your 5 again?
Taylor Green.
Taylor Green, yeah, Taylor Green. So, that is our top 5. We will give an honorable mention and want to briefly just mention where the Eagles are at quarterback. But before we do that, we had a comment here from Brett Eclipse that I thought was good. He wanted to know where we would rank Mendoza in the last 2 quarterback classes.
I was pulling it up so I could. So
here, we'll do it this way. You'd have him below Caleb Williams?
Yeah.
And again, this is as a prospect. Below Caleb Williams, below Jaden Daniels, below Drake May.
Yeah.
Anybody else from 2024? Penix, McCarthy, Nix?
No, I would have had him better than any of those guys, and then better than anybody last year.
Okay. Yeah, it'd probably be a toss-up for me with him and Cam Ward. So Mark would have him 4 behind Williams, Daniels, and May, not necessarily in that order. I would have him behind those 3 guys, and it would probably be a toss-up with Cam Ward. I think I would have him ahead of Ward, but it'd be pretty close for me. They'd be neck and neck.
Yeah, I was out on Ward, and I was proud. My biggest regret of last year is that I just hated Shuck, and I thought he was a Louisville merchant, but I think he's really good. He's clearly, to me, the best quarterback of that draft. Knowing what I know now, I would take Shuck going forward over Mendoza after seeing what I saw in the NFL. But Mendoza's a better quarterback prospect at this point than anybody was, in my opinion, at this time last year.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's pivot over to honorable mention, and we can sort of tie this in with the Eagles a little bit as well. So the Eagles have 2 quarterbacks currently under contract headed into the 2026 season. Obviously, Jalen Hurts is the entrenched starter. The Eagles are tied to him. I mean, technically, there's an out in his contract after 2027 with only $24 million in dead cap, but he's under contract for 3 more years. Pretty set at starter, despite what the radio will try to drum up as drama. However, the Eagles only have 1 other quarterback under contract, and it is Tanner McKee, who will play out the final year of his rookie deal in 2026, and then likely be gone. And so given what we know about how the Eagles value the backup quarterback position, I could see quarterback being something the Eagles look for on day 3 in the draft. It would not surprise me at all. It wouldn't shock me if they took a day 2 quarterback, and I don't think it would mean anything about Jalen Hurts. We just know how the Eagles prioritize these things. And I mean, I saw stuff floating around. Of course, we won't mention the radio stations, but talking about how if the Eagles draft a quarterback, Jalen Hurts should refuse to come back, blah blah blah. And I just don't think spending a day 2 draft pick on a quarterback is that big of a deal. Like the Patriots did that in 2008, 2011, 2014, and 2016 when they had Tom Brady. Like basically every 3 years when they were about to lose their backup, they would spend a day 2 pick on a guy. Now, there's nobody in this class I would love for the Eagles to take with the day 2 pick, but I could definitely see them taking a quarterback on day 3 in this draft, and we'll talk about who that maybe could be. But what are your thoughts on the Eagles, where they're at in the position, and where quarterback ranks as a priority in the draft? And by the way, this isn't a clickbait thing. We're going to talk about this for every position, so don't yell at us in the comments. But how does quarterback stack up in draft needs for you with the Eagles?
Last, maybe. I don't want to take a quarterback just because like we've talked about, I really hate this class. And if it was different, if there was a Jalen Hurts type guy out there, and that's obviously sounds like an anomaly and sounds funny to say, but in the second round, it was mobile, maybe had some issues processing or whatever you want to say. I could be talked into it, but I do think right now is such a contention window for the Eagles that it's so important that you add pieces to that can help right away, or that can either help right away or extend the window. So I do think, I really hope they don't do it in the first 3 rounds. Day 3 is day 3. I mean, whatever happens. If I'm doing an honorable mention for someone to replace Tanner McKee, I guess it would be Sawyer Robertson, who I don't really think is really an NFL athlete or has a ton of NFL traits or has a super live NFL arm. But he has a good deep ball. Over the last 2 years, he's thrown for about 6,800 yards, 59 touchdowns to 20 picks. That's enough success at 6'4" for me to say, sure, he probably deserves a shot on day 3 to be a third string guy. I do think Taylon Green makes some sense if you're saying developmentally he's a third string guy and you get someone to be the backup or you keep McKee, whatever the case may be. Taylon Green makes some sense.
Yeah, Cade Klubnik is the guy that I was somewhat interested in for the Eagles on day 3 out of Clemson. He was a 5-star recruit. He's actually the number 1 recruit in his recruiting class. Tremendous success at the high school level, 3 consecutive state titles, never lost a game as a starter. Started for 3 years at Clemson. 2024 was his best year. Leads Clemson to the ACC championship and a college football playoff berth. But 2025 was a bit of a letdown. He's on the smaller side at 6'2", 210 pounds, which is 33rd and 15th percentile. But like I said, 3-year starter, over 1,400 career passing attempts. And I like Tanner McKee a lot. I don't necessarily like him being the backup for Jalen Hurts. Like, I think you want your backup to be a similar style to your starter, and that's where I think Klubnik is more. He's got good deep ball placement. I think he can layer throws over the middle of the field decently. He's good at moving in the pocket. He can break the pocket while keeping his eyes downfield, and he's got athleticism. He won a 400-meter state title in high school, so he's got good straight line speed. He executes a lot of RPOs at Clemson, and so I can see where if you needed a guy to step in for a couple of games, you could run RPOs, you can design run, and you can throw deep balls to A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, and there's a pathway to winning some games there with a really good defense. He is slow to progress through his reads. He locks onto that number 1 target. He struggles when the picture changes post-snap. I think those are all things you could say about Jalen Hurts. I wouldn't necessarily agree with all of them, but I think you could say some of those things about him. He's got good but not great arm strength. Again, I think you could say that about Hurts. He's a really good deep ball thrower, but not the strongest arm. However, I think Jalen Hurts' decision-making is far superior to his, and so obviously you're going to have a drop-off when you go to a backup quarterback. And he was inconsistent in his play in 2025, and that was really highlighted against better competition. But for a guy that I think is going to go day 3, I said his best scheme fit would be an RPO, play action, bootleg heavy offense that simplifies reads and lets him use his athleticism on the perimeter. And I do think that's the type of offense the Eagles are going to move towards with Sean Mannion. So if you're telling me the Eagles drafted a guy on day 3 and you told me it was Cade Klubnik, I'm fine with that.
Yeah, I'm not a big Cade guy, but yeah, day 3 is day 3. All of these guys after the top 4 are kind of, about equal to me.
Yeah. So Brett Eclipse says that he would have liked Chambliss for Philly round 3 or 4 if he had declared. Yeah, he back at Ole Miss for one more season, right?
Yeah, he would have been my QB2. He probably would have been in my top 50 or 60, I think.
Yeah,
weird.
I don't think he would have made it to where the Eagles would have been drafting a quarterback.
Yeah, weird trajectory for Chambliss, and he only played part of last year, so it's a really weird career. It'll be interesting to see what he does at Ole Miss again, to see if he's able to repeat that, not in a Lane Kiffin system, and without Charlie Weiss Jr. calling plays in the playoffs. So it'll be interesting to see what Chambliss does this year. He would have been my QB2 just off of the strength of how good he was down the stretch last year. I actually thought he should have been the Heisman last season over Mendoza. But yeah, I think it's good for him that he was able to go back and make him a bag at Ole Miss, and delay it another year and give NFL teams another chance to see him. And I think he put enough on tape this year that he probably, even if he has a bad year, will be a day 3 pick next year that can, make a living.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, that is going to do it for our QB rankings. Again, we'll be doing these rankings separately from Birds of the Round Table, but we're going to mix the order up. So we're not doing running backs next week like they just did. We're actually going to jump to tight ends next because of all the positions outside of quarterback. The combine probably impacts tight ends the least. And that is a very important position for the Eagles. So next week, you guys can tune in. We'll be talking about our top 5 tight ends in the NFL, or in the 2026 NFL draft. And then we'll be post-combine, and we're going to flip over and go through defensive positions before we circle back to the offense. So hope you guys enjoyed the show. Hope you enjoy our QB rankings. You can sound off in the comments on Twitter. Let us know what you guys think. And until, we'll catch you guys next time. Mark, before we get out of here, though, do you have any final thoughts you want to leave with the people?
I'm excited about tight end. Very excited about tight end. I feel like I feel like I'm bad at these quarterback preview shows because I feel like I'm always negative about quarterbacks. I don't know what that. I think because you have such a magnifying glass on college quarterbacks because they're so important to that team's success generally. So I think that's part of it. But I feel like I get to nerd out next week with tight end. I can't wait to talk Michael Trigg. That's my tease for next week. Michael Trigg. Pull the trig.
All right. Well, thank you guys for joining us for episode number 225 of Chalk Talk. If you enjoy what you heard on the show, and we know that you do, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next episode. Drop us a 5-star rating wherever you stream your podcast. You can follow us on Twitter. I am at Shane Half NFL. He is at Mark Henry Jr. NFL. And we will catch you guys next time.